Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on ABC News Live for this very special edition of In the Kitchen, extending the conversation. Every week on ABC, our network primetime special, Soul of the Nation, takes a deeper look at Black life in America and unveils some of those hard truths that we all have to reckon with. Each Soul of the Nation episode has a segment called In the Kitchen, where we have the same honest conversations that are common around the kitchen tables of many Black families. The conversations are so good, we wanted to keep them going.
I'm Sunny Hostin, and welcome to Soul of a Nation's In the Kitchen. This is the place where each week we chop it up like we do around our kitchen table, where the talk is highly opinionated, candid, and also a lot of fun. I'm excited to have in the kitchen voices of the next generation and beyond. With me are author, educator, artist, and one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, Patrisse Cullors. We also have activist and New York City Council candidate, Chi Osei, and activist Tiana Arata. Welcome. So we're just gonna have a conversation, right? The types of conversations that we have at home with our friends around the table, in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. That's what it's called, in the kitchen. Right. And I wanted to speak with all of you because it occurred to me that Gen Z is really going through it. Really going through it. My kids are Gen Z. I know I don't look like I have Gen Z kids, but I do. So my son's 18, my daughter's 14. And my son took a gap year this year before going to college. And you know, we were messing with him. We're like, your last name is not Obama. You need to go to college. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he explained to us that he feels bad. He's depressed. He's lived through so much. Yeah, right. And you know, growing up in the 60s and the 70s, we're like, what have you lived through? Mm. And in thinking about it, he's describing, I'm living through, you know, the Me Too movement. I'm living through Black Lives Matter. I'm living through George Floyd. I'm living through seeing, you know, men that look like me killed in the streets, 9/11, student loan crisis. I'm living through all of this, and I feel bad. Global pandemic. I missed my senior year. I feel bad. What has life been to you?
Honestly, life, I think, especially for people my generation, I just turned 20 this last summer, like, you recognize, like, living, especially in this country, like, it can just be so cruel. Like, we're just all, like, going through the motions, trying to, like, live our daily life, and it's like, you don't, I feel like sometimes I don't even have a second to myself, especially just with every major event that's been happening, basically damn near like week after week at this point. I'm just like, can I even get grounded, have my bearings? Like, do you?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, I'm not Gen Z, I'm millennial. And when I speak to mostly Gen Z audiences, I'm always reminding myself, like, these children were children when at that launch of BLM, like 7, 8 years old. And social media has, in all the amazing ways, allowed for these conversations to become global, but also has created an environment where Gen Z sees everything. Nothing is, no parent can shield themselves or their children from what is happening anymore. You don't have like this curated situation because the screens are everywhere and social media is everywhere. So just, you know, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, March for Our Lives, you know, the immigrant rights movement. I mean, 4 years of a fascist. And on top of that, a global pandemic and their family member. You know, my child is 4 and when we go outside, he notices everything. Like, that person doesn't have a mask. Are we gonna get the coronavirus? I mean, he's 4 and his anxiety is so high. So I just think that we're in this moment where we have to remind ourselves what a generation has gone through. And it's why, you know, in Black Lives Matter, we talk a lot about healing and joy.
Yeah.
And like, it's also why I think Gen Zs, you know, millennials, I think we are an intense generation, you know? And I think it's why Gen Z can go to like Twitter and TikTok and like make fun of it all and like have fun with it because we need humor in this moment because it's just too much.
Yeah, I really like what you just said just now. I mean, I think our generation is very hyper aware. When they say ignorance is bliss, I really feel that being a Gen Z person.
You don't have that.
You don't have the ignorance. It's at our fingertips. You can
Yeah.
see what's happening in the world through every screen that you can imagine. And that's overwhelming. But it's also necessary and beautiful. I think we are in a pinnacle in life where there are multiple crises that need tending to, and we can't leave it up to generations before us to tend to those crises. And
Do you feel like we've screwed it up for y'all?
and generations prior screwed it up as well. But and I think we are acknowledging that, and you know, also acknowledging the power and the voice and the strength that we have and the potential that we have to change, you know, many of these situations that we've been living in.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, can you find joy in the fact that there's this movement going on that you're embracing and that you're a part of? Does that feel like empowering at all?
I mean, that's crazy because I was just thinking about this a day or two ago. I was living in like a super small community, San Luis Obispo, and there was like no black people there, no black visibility on top of that. And it's finally like once our like organizing and activist community started coming together, like we all came out of the woodworks, and it's like wow, we have each other. Like even though we're like going through everything, like it's nice to have a space where the whole goal is to uplift you. Like the whole goal is to break down all these barriers and to say, look, like we understand like all these systemic oppressions from every angle and every facet that we've had to face, but that like, I don't know, it's just beautiful being able to like be around people who really feel like they understand you. Like we're all here for like a common goal.
Do you feel now that you've seen a black president? That's your generation. That's possible. Does that empower you at all?
If you asked me that 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, definitely. Across the board, yes. I'm very happy that we've had our first black president. But you know, identity politics is something that our generation is also very hyper aware of. You know, when you start to look at what has been done throughout an Obama presidency or any presidency in the history of America, it's not nice stuff. You know, we vilify the Republicans or the right as we should, but we tend to ignore that Democrats drop bombs across the world as well. They just put BLM on the bomber. You know, it's great that we've had our first black president. It's great that we have our first black VP. But we need action. We need real legislation that helps our people.
In the Kitchen, extending the conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, extending the conversation.
I was thinking about back to the question around joy and like this movement. Some of the places I feel the most joy is at Black Lives Matter protests. And, you know,
Why?
Well, I will say this, 2 things. One, the media portrays our protests like, hurrah! They get us in like, you know, like we're storming down the street with our fist up.
They frame the protests now as violent.
All the time.
Rioting.
All the time. And yet, if you've actually been to one, it feels like a frickin' festival. People are dancing, you have the music out, and it's because I feel like for black folks, it feels like the one moment where we get to feel free together. And I think it's really important. I've been reframing, even when I talk about protests, like protests are a safe space. What happened on January 6th was not a protest. That was a riot, that was insurrection. What we do is come together to celebrate our lives and demand that other people celebrate us too. And I feel like that we saw that last summer, and we saw that across, race, class, gender, generation. And I feel like, when we started BLM, it was mostly just Black millennials out in the street. So to see, Black Gen Zers take to Black Lives Matter and, do what Tiana is doing, do what you're doing, it feels like a game changer. And that's what I feel like the Gen Zer generation is. Y'all are game changers.
Definitely. And let me ask you, Tiana, you're facing, what, 13 charges?
13 charges.
13 charges because you organized a Black Lives Matter protest. How does that feel?
It feels like this country in itself, these like governmental structures that are supposed to be here to protect me are just slamming a door right in my face. Like, it really makes me realize, like, wow, I have to fight so hard as a Black woman to just be free. And that's not even liberation yet. That's just like, oh, I'm just trying to stay out of jail. Like, I mean, it's been frustrating. It's been really unveiling seeing everyone's reaction to my situation. A lot of people have been supportive, like, oh my God, I can't believe like this would happen. I mean, it's crazy when you see your own life being used for the sake of politics. It has nothing to do with me or any of my actions that day. It was a peaceful, beautiful, like joyous protest. And just to see city council officials naming me still last week in their meetings and using me for their own gain, and DAs using me for re-election, just trying to build their own name off of a 20-year-old, I was 19 last summer, off of like a 19, 20-year-old Black girl who's fighting for liberation because I've been in this boxed community that's less than 2% Black for all these years, and we finally had some moments where we can say, look, we're here, like, you're not gonna ignore our needs. We're not gonna keep ignoring your microaggressions. We're not gonna be silent in class anymore. Like, it's been a trip. I don't know, I didn't expect, it's honestly kind of like hell to rain down on me how it has, but I've been trying to like learn a lot of lessons and grow through this, but I mean, it just shows you like how much work there still is to be done. Like, if something like this can happen to me and it was after the conclusion of a peaceful protest, like, just look at what they're doing to people across the board, especially Black people. It's always Black people, no matter what. Like, you can be walking down the street, like,
that speaks to your power, though.
I think you're magnificent.
You, as a 19-year-old Black woman, you strike fear in all of their hearts. You know, the solidarity that you organized behind that nonviolent protest, the people that you brought in that moment, that fears. That's one of the
they saw change. Yeah, they saw.
And with that power and with that strength that you may or may not have been acknowledging from those charges that have been placed on you, we will continue organizing and building and manifesting that power to come back again, because we see that there is a chink in their armor and weakness, because they see an individual like yourself with this much strength and this much vigor as a threat to their structure that they've built over centuries.
When you started Black Lives Matter, I see your face. I see the tears in your eyes. When you started Black Lives Matter, did you ever imagine something like this?
Yes, but
see, now you're gonna have all of us crying.
I
know.
Because she's magnificent.
Yeah, and I met Tiana. Wow, how long have we? What was it?
End of July, early August.
So one of the unofficial mayor of Leimert Park contacted me, and he said, "There's this young girl out of SLO, California that's facing a lot of charges. Like, do you think you can help her?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, let me put us in touch. Like, let me sit with her and her family and let's talk about what she's facing. Because the reality is that Black people who fought for our lives and have fought for our liberation have always been criminalized. Angela Davis, Huey P. Newton, everybody's now seeing Judas and the Black Messiah with Fred Hampton. So when we started BLM, 7.5 years ago, first of all, I didn't realize we were going to be starting the next civil rights movement. So that's not,
Sure you didn't.
sitting on social media, in classic millennial form. It started on social media. We were not in a boardroom, we were not, on a call. We were not sitting together, processing. We were upset, we were angry, we were hurt. Like, George Zimmerman was just acquitted for killing a boy, for killing a 17-year-old boy. And I was pissed. And I did not want George Zimmerman to get the end of that story. So when we started Black Lives Matter, Alicia, Opal, and I wanted it to be huge. And I remember putting on social media, like, yo, Alicia and I started this thing, it's called Black Lives Matter. I hope it gets bigger than we could ever imagine. Did I foresee the bigness?
No.
No, you don't know those things, you just imagine them. But I also didn't realize how quickly we would be challenged. Demonized. How quickly we would be called terrorists. How quickly we would be criminalized. But I very quickly I was like, oh, this is what's happening again. Like, I've read about this, like
death threats.
Yes, the death threats, the needing security, all those things. Like, I didn't realize that would be my life, but the minute it started to be, I just went back to ancestors. I went back to living legends like Angela, and I was like, okay, this is the moment we're in. And I called Angela Davis. The way Tiana called me, I called Angela. Like, okay, so they're going after us. What do we do?
Yeah.
They went after
real.
you. What
It's real.
Because there's no rule book. We don't have, we've gone through it so many generations, but once it starts to happen to you, it's so disorienting and confusing. You're looking around like, wait, but why me? Like,
Like, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to solve the problem.
That's right.
Right.
Like,
You wanted to help.
exactly, trying to uplift people. And when you have white supremacists and even moderates and all these other groups of people who are just so stuck on thinking that you're here for evil, you're here for personal gain or whatever it could be, it's infuriating, honestly.
well, here's my thing. I truly believe that most white people are scared of Black Lives Matter because they know that when white folks get together, it means white supremacy. It means violence. Versus when Black people are getting together, we are truly trying to change through peace and nonviolence. And I don't think that white folks understand anything outside of supremacist violence in any context. So part of the work of Black Lives Matter is to be like, no, we're going to be unapologetic about who we are, but also to remind folks, like, actually, when Black people get free, everybody else gets more free.
Right.
In the Kitchen, extending the conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, extending the conversation.
I think what's interesting, something that you just pointed out, I hadn't really thought of, is this notion that they're criminalizing the work.
Yes.
Making it seem like all of the, Black Lives Matter protests are violent.
Yes.
That, Tiana is a criminal.
That's right.
And how effective that framing
Absolutely.
has been.
Absolutely.
Does that scare you in your work? In your activism?
It scares me, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, they've been doing this for decades, centuries. But it reinvigorates that my mission, when organizing a protest, like I did this past summer, leading protests, is to, pay attention to the narrative that's going to be placed on us and also work on changing that narrative. When you talked about how one of the most joyous places is a Black Lives Matter protest, I 100% agree with that. It's also therapeutic. When I was out last summer in New York City, I've documented everything. I mean, these tools that we have, being Gen Z and millennials, are perfect for changing our narrative.
Yeah.
You know, when we saw on CNN or MSNBC, you know, footage of people rioting and looting, that wasn't what was going on the ground.
That's right.
And we knew that as organizers.
Where does it come from then? Because that's what we see.
Well,
That's what white
I think
America
it was
sees.
CNN. Don't quote me. Credible news outlet, not a right-wing news outlet, said it. I think in the summer it was either 2 or 3% of violence happened at our Black Lives Matter protest.
7%.
Okay, so you know because you were actually a journalist. 7%, which is such a small percentage. Doesn't mean it's okay, but the other thing that I try to say and I try to talk about is that I don't know any of those people. Do you?
I don't know any of them.
I don't know any of those
Exactly.
people. Who are
So,
those people? Are they
those
outside
people?
forces?
Of course.
Who are those people?
Absolutely.
I got footage within that first week of this white man coming up to me and asking me and a group of people that I was around to flip over a truck with a camera out. The video went viral. He was a white supremacist vlogger.
Of
Found him all on the
course.
internet. They do that. I mean, this country is rooted in violence, and obviously when there are a lot of people protesting against violence, the violent people are going to come out.
Well, also it's also they are very, very strategic. So I think it was, and now I'm going to look to you, Sunny, now for all the journalists statistics. 58% of the GOP believes that January 6th was Antifa.
It's a little more than that, yeah.
That is bananas. So the way they've created this idea of what we do and who we are has everything to do with them,
With
their perception.
outlook, yes.
Exactly. And then also literally them. Minneapolis, when we found out who really burned down the police station, everywhere in the
That's
country,
right. Yeah.
everywhere in the country when we were in the height of our protests, I remember talking to organizers and them being like, there are some fishy things happening and we're not leading it, we're not doing it, so who is? And I think that is really important.
But how do you change the narrative now? I mean, you're Gen Z leaders, right? At least I consider you to be. Where do we go now? New administration. We're still in the middle of a terrible pandemic. We're still in the middle of everything. But where do we go?
You know, when I was organizing and listening to what people were demanding in the streets, it was to defund the police. It was to divest from the police. It was to reinvest back into our communities. And our president doesn't do that. Our Senate doesn't do that.
That's right.
Our city council does.
That's
and
right.
most of us don't vote in those races anymore. You know, we live in a neighborhood where there's underfunded public education systems, underfunded public housing, underfunded healthcare, and that's at the hands of our local electeds, and I want to change that dynamic.
Do you think that there's support in the Black community for defunding the police?
You know, there is also an issue of gun violence within my district. But I am tired of hearing this narrative that Black people are inherently violent.
Yeah.
And with that narrative, the action to that narrative is more police. That's been the answer for quite some time. Why don't we focus on, you know, our schools and our overcrowded classrooms and the fact that our teachers have to pay for their own school supplies at the beginning of the school year while, you know, there are police helicopters policing our neighborhoods. You know, there are different things that need tending to rather than, you know, just jumping to the answer of more police.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
to this,
yeah,
Sunny?
of course.
I also feel like
We're at the kitchen table. We're in the kitchen.
I also feel like sometimes we don't know what we need until we get it.
Okay.
So this idea that police are the only way that we're gonna be able to, you know, hold law and order together. If it's true, you know, you can go into some Black communities and then be like, I don't know about defunding, like I don't know. But if you start to ask, well, do you want more access to adequate education?
Absolutely.
Do you want more housing? Do you want access to
Mental health counseling.
mental health services, more green space and parks, after school programming. Well, guess what? All that gets cut every year, but you know what doesn't? Police budgets. You know what gets more money? Police budgets. And then people start to be like, oh, wait, so you're telling me that my money is mostly going, my tax dollars are mostly going to jails, prisons, and police?
Right.
Well, that's a different conversation. And I think, you know, for the work that we've done in these last 7.5 years, and just to hear you just share your messaging and your beliefs, it's not just messaging, is so powerful because we have been desperately needing reinvestment in our communities for decades. I think about, you know, growing up with a single mom and what she would have needed, what her, you know, I have a brother who's schizophrenia, and we didn't, his first diagnosis was in a jail, not a mental health facility. And there are all these ways in which every single social service but police has turned into only having police.
Yeah.
Only giving them the responsibility of everything. And honestly, and people think I don't talk to cops, I do.
They don't want to respond.
Exactly.
I talk to cops all the time.
And they're like,
I've
yeah, you
interviewed
know
them.
what? I don't want to go.
They don't want to
out
respond to that. They want to investigate true crime.
Exactly. Exactly.
They say it all the time.
And if you don't,
Yes.
and
Right.
if you don't want to investigate that, there are people that are doing that, are
Yes.
doing that work, that
They
are
want to do
professionals
true crime.
Who can really
who can really tend
resolve
to
a lot
resolve
of-
situations.
That's
yes.
what they want to do.
In the Kitchen. Extending the Conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, Extending the Conversation.
So Tiana, tell us about your story, because you have been charged with 13 misdemeanors.
Yeah, so I'll touch on it lightly. I mean, it's definitely a difficult subject right now, like having an active case. So I am an activist and an organizer, and I was living in San Luis Obispo for 4 years. I was super involved in the community there. And after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor last year, a lot of us started getting together, and I started organizing a lot of protests. And there really is very limited Black people in SLO, is what we call it. And I actually, after a string of maybe 24 or maybe 20 or something protests, on July 21st, after the conclusion of a peaceful protest, I was mob ambush arrested by the police. While I was just packing up my car, like everybody had dispersed from the park. And since then, it has just been utterly insane. I mean, I couldn't go out in public. I couldn't drive my own car for 3 months. I had to have my friends move it from the park where I was arrested because they took me straight to the police station. Like I couldn't even drive my car home. And ever since then, I was homeless because of it. Like I didn't have actually stable housing, like real stable, like this is my own place, until like a few weeks ago when I actually had to go through like a homeless student program through my university. And so it's taken a toll on my ability to really like function and cope, because it's like when you don't have your basic needs met, when you're living out of a car, going up and down the state of California, staying on people's couches, like with your mom just trying to go anywhere, and also in the middle of a pandemic, like that's not even safe. It's just like, how am I even supposed to move forward? But yeah, that's yeah. It's been difficult. I mean, I'm trying to like keep my bearings, and I think I fell into like a depression for a really long time, and I didn't even recognize it. But
Oh, because you organized,
because I organized a protest.
which is your right,
Right. Remember that part?
which is your constitutional right as an
Yeah.
American citizen.
Because I harnessed that as a Black woman, and I don't know, but I've seen it now, like my case, it's no longer about me, about the actions of anything or anybody that happened that day. It's literally politics. But it's like a human life is bigger than politics. Especially a 20-year-old girl. Woman, but still, like, I'm young, like, I can be naive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just hope that in my life, like, we can continue to organize, not even just on the political side. Like, yes, it's immensely important to have people in office, but also to have people who are embedded in the community, who are dedicated to how are we going to fundraise to meet these people's needs, or how are we going to include our houseless neighbors, or how are we going to figure out what, like, even like when it comes to education, because you only really learn so much in K through 12. Like, how are we going to come through and educate community members of all ages on the oppression and our real history, because it's so hidden from us. It's
Mutual aid.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just seeing, I don't know.
Did you, maybe I'm wrong, but for both of you, did you see maybe an increase of people trying to be more in touch with their community after the uprisings this summer?
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's through mutual aid, whether it's through, you know, just being an active member of their community. Is that something that either of you have witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like honestly on the onset of the pandemic, like I feel like so many of us realize that we're like a global community and family, and that we have to figure out how to take care of each other. And I just remember, you know, knocking on neighbors' doors and like checking on people. And then the uprisings happened, and it felt like there was this kind of closeness and this like crispening clarity about how effed up everything was and how we had to come together.
Right.
I met Tiana because of the protests. Like, I feel like we have to show up for each other, whether you're in New York City or SLO, California. Like, we have to show up for each other.
Well, we're a family.
Yes.
Right.
It's kind of the difference, right? Black community.
Yeah, that's why it
We're
hurts so
family.
much when we see someone else, you know, when we see someone that's a complete stranger get killed. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like our brother, our sister, our sibling is being harmed. There's something that feels deeply personal about
Does.
that.
It's our family.
Absolutely.
In the Kitchen, Extending the Conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to The Kitchen, Extending the Conversation.
When was the moment when you knew that you're Black?
I love this question.
And I'll start with you.
I have two answers.
Okay.
Because there's a moment where I was taught to be proud of my Blackness, and there was a moment where I knew that my Blackness was a threat. Because they didn't happen at the same time. I grew up in a really pro-Black home, a really pro-Black family, and my father was the first person to teach me the Black Power Fist. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was what we did when we greeted each other, when we left each other. You know, all my siblings. He just taught me to be proud of who I was. I mean, really, you know, I see all these like viral Instagram moments with fathers and their daughters, like reminding them who they are and like, you know, being their cheerleaders. That's how my father was with me. Like very like, mommy, like, you take care of business, they love you, I love you, you know. I grew up with a bunch of very masculine and also sensitive men. So my father was a big crier. You know, I would sit in his lap eating chili beans, and he'd be crying, and I'd be like, Daddy, why are you crying? He'd be like, I just love you so much, Mom. So much. I mean, just very powerful, you know? It was so I had a lot of pride. I had a lot of pride in who I was as a young Black girl. And it had everything to do with those moments with my father. But the moment when I realized that my Blackness was a threat, that it was, you know, the moment of bigotry, and that really set me apart was we were learning about slavery and elementary school. It was 2nd or 3rd grade. And 2 boys who I thought were my best friends came up to me. I was at a tree, I remember, and they called me the N-word. And it's so interesting because I feel like, and maybe you all know this as Black folks, like, you may not know what a word is necessarily, but the way it hits you, that it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I literally crumbled and I sobbed. And it seemed like in my, 8, 9-year-old brain, like I was there for hours. I might have only been there for 5, 10 minutes, but a teacher had to come find me because I wasn't at my after school program, and she found me sobbing uncontrollably. I was so disturbed. I was so scared. And she pulled me aside and she was trying to console me. Patrice, what's wrong? Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. And I finally told her, these boys called me the N-word. And she wasn't a Black teacher, but she was really sympathetic. But the whole day changed. And my whole understanding of myself, it was like an overwhelming sense of shame for who I was. It was something completely different than what I had been taught. All of a sudden was washed over me. And I remember that day changed everything for me. It changed how I saw those boys, how I saw myself, how I saw other Black people. And, I feel like I've been battling those 2 worlds ever since.
Wow.
The world of believing and trusting and knowing how beautiful it is to be Black, and then this other world that sees us as everything terrible, ugly, humiliating. And I think those 2 parallels are really important to name.
I share, a similar experience to that. To both of those stories. I grew up in an extremely pro-Black household, thankfully. My grandfather, the late Teddy Van, was a Grammy Award-winning music producer. He, him and my mom wrote a song back in the 70s called "Santa Claus is a Black Man." He made
Isn't
this
he?
own. Yeah. He made this superhero called Color Man. So I grew up in a very pro-Black household, and that's what always made me aware of the color of my skin, because the color of my skin meant greatness, and I was so thankful for that. And it's been my life since I've been aware of that. So I think it was always who I was and what I acknowledged. In terms of, I guess, the second part of the story, it was 2nd or 3rd grade, and it was like we were learning slavery in school, and the teacher wasn't teaching enough about the slavery. It was one part of the book that she was going over, and I called it out that she wasn't going, deeper into the chapter of slavery because of, how I was raised and the awareness that I had of slavery. And, kids in my class had an issue of me bringing up the fact that she wasn't going deeper into it. Some said it doesn't matter, leave it alone. But those 2, experiences kind of, are similar to mine as well. But yeah.
Yeah. When was the moment, Tiana, when you knew you were Black?
So it was a little bit different for me, like my home environment. My mom is white, and she was a single mother. I saw my dad on the weekends, but I was mostly with my mom. And so there was always a barrier. I was always like, well, my mom is so pretty. Why don't I look like her? And I was always I moved around a lot, and I was always going to schools with a super small Black population. It was highly Latinx or highly white, but there was never Black people at my schools. And so I didn't even have any of this representation even. And it was, 2nd or 3rd grade. And I remember thinking well, because you're in elementary school, you want your little elementary school boyfriend or girlfriend, whoever. And I'm like, why do none of these people like me? Why do none of these people even think I'm pretty? Why do I have to try so much harder to even be in the friend group? And I mean, I don't know a definitive moment, but it was definitely in elementary school because just everybody treats you as other.
Yeah.
Like you're other, you're black, you're dirty, you smell bad, you have like you should straighten your hair, you should assimilate, you should do this, you should do that. And it's like you're only what, 7 or 8 years old?
So you felt otherized even then.
Even then. And it's like it's crazy, and I look at my like little cousins sometimes and I wonder like what they go through, because you know racism at a very young age, because it's not born, it's taught, but it's taught from the moment that you're brought into this world.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep the conversation going. Use the hashtag Soul of a Nation to voice your opinions about the things we discussed today. I'm Sunny Hostin, and I'll be back in the kitchen next week.
Thanks for keeping the conversation going with us, and be sure to catch full episodes of Soul of a Nation on ABC every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. Don't go anywhere. There's much more of ABC News Live still ahead.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.